All right, good morning. It's Thursday, January 27. We haven't had a cartography community meeting in a little bit due to Thanksgiving and the holidays, so we've actually missed this for 2 months. So it's good to be back. Uh, as we normally do with these retros over the past year, like the first meeting of the year, I like to sort of go do a quick view of the things that happened over the past year, and then maybe let's kind of look at this actually, because we have quite a few meetings in this document, and this is actually pretty awesome. We can go all the way back to February of 2020. So we've been doing this for almost 2 years now, having this public meeting, and then I think that is absolutely fantastic. Um, Other things that are going on that are going to be going on today is that Ryan is going to show off his Sphinx documentation, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about Neo4j 4.x upgrade plans and anything else that anybody wants to bring to the meeting, really. Okay, so with that, let me see. Let me just double check that the document I have is correct. So put this together. All right. Okay, I'm going to share this tab instead. Okay, so this is a pretty short document, actually. This is just a little bit of a one-pager. It's still in draft, but a very quick view of the things that happened last year. It's kind of fun, I think. I will share this when it's completely ready, but overall, I think that the main thing is that in last year's 2021 document, we wrote that we want to build a world where robots use a self-maintaining map to quickly find and solve problems while you sleep. At least in many ways for us internally at Lyft, when we were putting this together, I think that we succeeded. And then, so at least, the open source components serve us as a strong enough platform for us to build applications on top of it. And then I'm excited about being able to share some of that more broadly. We're drafting up a number of different uh, I guess different components and different blog posts and how to apply that, and trying to think of, it's a little tricky because like, oh, you have the graph component stuff, and then you have the application stuff that takes actions on that graph, and what is the best way that makes sense, that is most applicable for people to consume, view, learn, all that stuff. As highlights, what we have, this is a very sparse list, but as highlights, we have Cloudinix. Joined us actually as contributors last year, and I think Puru and Kedar, they adopted Cartography, and then they contributed a number of different modules, including support for Microsoft Azure, uh, which is really awesome. And additionally, earlier in 2021, I added the feature to have AWS requested syncs. So previously, you needed to run everything in AWS as sort of like this big giant monolith thing, and then so it would be impossible for you to say, I simply only want to sync S3 buckets, and now we have that feature. Admittedly, it's a little rough around the edges, but yeah, it honestly it works. April, contributors from PayPay, namely, well, Ryan, a lot of it, Ryan added a little support for a lot of different modules, including Docker Compose for testers, and over the course of the year, there's support for multiple other plugins. A very important highlight too is that we researched, solved, and documented some pretty important graph data ingestion problems. And with this issue, let me see if I can actually get to this one correctly. Yeah. Okay. So one of these issues was, so this is one pretty fundamental issue where if you are running the graph fronted by something like a network load balancer in AWS, then you may run into a situation where you will get intermittent network timeouts. This took a little bit of deep digging, but essentially we ended up creating a switch that exposes this argument to the Neo4j max connection lifetime parameter, saying that that we will match. Well, it adjusts the timeouts properly so that you won't get a hung connection, basically. And then this is maybe a situation that not many people will run into, but when you do run into it, it's very frustrating. So another thing too is significantly improving transaction behavior. Uh, on this one, at least, there's two parts to this. The first one is improving the behavior of graph statements. So graph statements are run with like our cleanup jobs, right? So things like we use this abstraction, and then we of a graph job to clean up nodes in the graph when they're all completely done. And then so what we do here is well, because this function is used for so many different plugins, it made sense to have one common way of making those updates. And so we use a managed write transaction function provided by the Neo4j driver instead of manually calling transaction.commit. And then we and so instead of handling our own, let me see if I can actually find this on here. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit too much into the weeds here, but this makes a very common choke point for the graph a lot more reliable. The larger improvement that I want to bring up is this. I think it's the 690 issue. No, that's not quite it, actually. Okay. Let me grab it. It definitely is worth talking about. It will look like this. I'm not seeing the exact same issue but okay, so the idea, I've talked about this a couple of times in the past, maybe like the October meeting or the September meeting, but the idea is that you want to use Neo4j transaction functions so that you get automated retry behavior. Otherwise, you may come into the case where if you're trying to load enough data, or if your network conditions at that exact moment are unhappy enough, then you'll be frustrated. And so this solution, I've been kind of applying this as a band-aid whenever we see it, but I think that there's a couple of different thoughts I'll share later on how we can generalize this and make it useful for on a wider basis, possibly incorporating it for our plans to upgrade to Neo4j 4.x. The actual issue of this is documented it's in one of these long-standing issues. One of them is 170. Yeah, so this issue from October 2019, I believe we finally have a good handle on this. See the follow-up discussions in all of these things. So 522. Yeah, this is what I was talking about. So you run into a situation where you will see a service unavailable, failed to read from defunct connection, or other weird behaviors saying like data consistency error, unable to load node with ID 123, whatever. And the fix is everything that I just mentioned up to this point. Okay, moving on. Nicholas Flacco published this blog, powering security reports with cartography and flight workflows. So this is something that we found really helpful on this whole problem of how can we make graph data useful for more people, make it so that you don't have to query the graph directly. Your power users, sure, they will be able to take advantage of all the power that the syntax allows them and all that. But people that are just needing to get people that are just needing to consume the data in a very quick way, that don't necessarily care about all those details, yeah, sometimes a table or a pie chart is a lot more valuable for them. And and finally, October, we have community, adding support for PagerDuty and Kubernetes. I believe these are both actually Ryan PRs. Yeah, I think so. So anyway, yeah, thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you for being here, by the way. And let's see. So retro, I'll kind of go very quick. There's really not that much left in this document. Uh, on roadmap retrospective, on last year's roadmap items, we promised a few things that I think that weren't necessarily very realistic from this specific project. Uh, on reliability front, allow users to increase sync frequency. This one, I'm going to put this as sort of a partial complete or something that's not really well defined. The actual exit criteria for this wasn't well defined in the first place. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to skip over this. And, we definitely did improve things like sync reliability due to better understanding how Neo4j loads in data from those issues I just talked about now. On developer velocity front, we talked about some ideas about creating a generic declarative sync where you can create new modules without needing to write Cypher queries. Did not get to this. Abstract Neo4j entirely so developers define objects in Python. We did not get to that last year, and I don't know if I want to commit to this year either. I think that I think that I think that things are, I'm definitely open for a discussion here, but then this isn't the super big priority for the project right now. Stretch goal, decouple the get phase from the load phase so developers can define their own data loaders other than Neo4j. Again, not a super huge priority for the project. We just did not have time last year. Yeah. Business intelligence, making data usable and viewable in other platforms. Yep, this was blogged about. And provide insight to changes of cartography data over time. We've had a couple of different conversations over the past year on how to do this. Did not get, I think that one of the fundamentals of this project is we will give you a view of all of your data specifically right now. And then this is our snapshot. And I think that we've sort of found our niche and found found that this design choice is something that we decided early on, and for now at least it makes sense to continue this way because there are a number of different consumers that rely on this behavior staying this way. And to provide insight to changes of data, you can augment that with approaches described in this blog to use like secondary or other data source or data sources other than Neo4j to make this happen. And as a brief note, like a very vague overview of what I would like to see going forward, I'd like to so in a way, cartography has pivoted from its origins as an offensive red teaming permissions discovery tool to something more of a very sophisticated inventory for an organization's cloud assets. I would, in broad strokes, like to refocus this work back in 2022 on highlighting security problems from an offensive perspective, such as by adding capabilities like making privilege paths, cloud escalation, privilege paths obvious. Things like looking at Rhino security, privilege escalation, highlighting those really easily in the graph. There are other tools that are really good at being asset inventories, but our main value is aggregating and analyzing data sources in a uniquely useful way. Anyway, I just spent a lot of time on a very long monologue, and I'm sorry about that. I think it's fun to go through these things and kind of do a kind of share my own thoughts about like what I see about the project. And anyway, I'm obviously open for other people's thoughts and comments, and so please feel free to interject me at any time. Any other any comments and questions about the 2022 ideas? All right. Okay, so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a little bit of a break from talking, and then I'm going to hand it over. I think that, yeah, Ryan, do you think that you wanted to talk a little bit about your Sphinx documentation?
Yeah, sure. I can just give a quick overview of what I worked on. I also put a little bit more effort last night into it, so
Cool.
hopefully it's in a better state.
I'll
I'll
bring up,
share my
oh,
screen.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. I will stop presenting.
I have to change my system preferences.
Oh, no. I can bring up the PR for you then and just kind of have it there as sort of a background.
I can just change it really quick. 1 second. Okay, sorry about that. I'm back. Now let's
Cool.
give it. Okay, so you should be seeing my screen with the docs, right?
Yep.
Cool. So for this, basically, a problem that I kept having is going to the docs and then having to like kind of wander through the GitHub repo. Um, and so we actually have quite a few docs. It's just that some of them aren't really actually, if they are linked from somewhere, they're not easily discoverable. And so yeah, again, I kept like walking through the paths in GitHub directly and decided like I could probably write a Sphinx site for this since I've written about 80 million of them for various projects. And so for this, basically, I just went through and took the docs that were there, organized them into a hierarchy, made a table of contents, and then pulled them in. And so the basic idea is it's looks pretty similar to how things work in terms of the repo docs. Like I pulled in the README here. Um, and then past that, there's the table of contents on the side that go over kind of the docs as a whole. So for instance, there's the basic use like installation docs. Um, and the usage tutorial and stuff like that. And so the nice thing about this is that the specific skin that I'm using in desktop mode, for instance, has sidebars for the docs as a whole on the left, the full table of contents, and then on the pages themselves, it shows the contents for that specific page on the right-hand side. Um, and then the docs themselves look pretty much the same. They're using Markdown. Is the Sphinx? I added a Sphinx plugin to also be able to use Markdown. The Markdown is also able to use Sphinx inside of the Markdown in case you need to go out to some of the Sphinx features. And then in terms of the docs themselves, I kind of reorganized things. So previously the schema config and module stuff was all kind of separated. And so I put these together and also moved the coverage of features into the module information. And then the configuration information is here. The things like extra stuff that might go along with the module is also along with the module. And then the schema itself is also with the module. And yeah, for this, again, like the right-hand sidebar is pretty useful because you can quickly
Oh,
go
yeah.
to some of the schema things. Um, and similarly, I put the developer docs together, how to get in touch. And then as an extra, since sometimes you want to see the entire schema together, I also pull in all of the schema docs into a single document. And so, for instance, for this, you can use this to quickly jump between module types themselves, but it also
Gotcha.
has on the right-hand side, has the entire schema pulled into a single document. And for this, I'm not doubling any of the files. I'm just doing an include of the files.
That kind of reminds me a little bit of GitHub's what you call it, GraphQL docs. If you've ever seen those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it is kind of like that. Yeah. But the nice thing is you don't have to look at all the docs together because that would be a little much. It's in the separate ones inside of the modules as well. And for each one of these, you can actually see the source that goes along with this. So for this, I'm literally just including the files.
Nice.
Yeah, so hopefully, if everyone's happy with how this works,
Yeah.
oh, the other nice thing is there is a search functionality for this as well.
Love it. And
So
that's,
yeah, hopefully we can get it in soonish, because the longer that we wait, the
yeah.
more conflicts there are. So like
Awesome.
in the PR itself, there was one thing to notice is that the old docs I've changed to, I know this is a giant PR, I'm sorry for that. The old docs I've changed to just remove them and then add, yeah, like these. Just it's been moved here so that if people are like have bookmarked the old docs,
I see.
or if they show up in the search results, they will get a link to the correct location.
Oh, that's helpful.
I may have to go in and fix these links since I've changed some things around since then, but it should mostly be good. Cool.
Cool.
That's all I
So
had.
like a couple questions. So how does this interact with the README page, the README.md?
Yeah. So for that, I switched over the README to point to. Here we go. So instead of it pointing to the MD files, it points to the site docs instead. So people will still land on the Git repo and see the README. It would be nice to be able to figure out how we can combine the two, so that the README is actually inside of the Sphinx docs, and the README renders into a page that's in the Sphinx docs. I tried giving that a try, but then I didn't want to mess with the README too much. It's the kind of thing that, like, if we want to reduce the duplication between these,
Yeah.
that we can do, because right now the why and like the what sections are duplicated in the docs.
Okay.
And like these things could just be directly in the main doc, but then the issue is like the README is a single document inside of GitHub. So we have to figure out how to deal with that. Part of that could be like a script that takes a few of the MD docs and then writes out the README or something along those lines, but we'll have to figure that out afterwards, probably.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think the main thing that I would say is, as long as I think that let me know what you think on this. So like the README will be like this markdown thing. We have like a landing page for you go to the GitHub repo, and then there's the README, and then it links out to a number of different things, possibly within the docs folder, right?
Yeah, and
And
that would change to go over to the Sphinx site instead.
okay. And then so where I actually have no idea how this works. So how is the hosting for that work? Like, it's on GitHub, right? Or
Yeah, it's in GitHub pages. So if you look at the links,
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's like lift.github.com/cartography. And
Yeah.
I also added a GitHub action.
I see, I
Um,
see. So the GitHub action will do that Sphinx rendering and then go put it into a GitHub site.
yeah, it puts it into a branch, um, and that branch renders the pages. So um, yeah, it puts it in a particular place in the branch where the branch has nothing but the documentation, I think.
Hmm.
Um, and then that gets rendered to the site.
Got it. Okay, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so every master merge, it'll update. And it's also possible to, and I didn't add this in yet, but it's possible to also have it have multiple versions with a drop down for the version number, and
Mm,
you can trigger that based on tags, for instance. So it would be possible, for instance, to have like a 1.0 version, a 2.0 version, et cetera, or like a 1.x, 2.x, et cetera.
I like it. Yeah, let's merge. Let's try to merge it in today. Let's and then if there's stuff that's rough around the edges, and then if there's like broken links or whatever, then we can kind of just like fast follow those with fixes.
Yeah, I can go through really quick once again. Just I did change some stuff last night and just make sure that the links are still valid. I think I
Okay.
may have broken some of the README links. Um, and I want to make sure that the MD links that are I changed to point to locations are good because I don't want people landing on docs and like not being able
Yeah,
to find stuff. So,
got it.
but I'll do that really quick today, and then yeah, if we can merge it in after that, we might if anyone finds anything, we can follow up fixes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
and a thing that we would follow up with after this would be like internationalization with
mm,
Transifex. The Sphinx has a plugin for that that connects the Transifex, and Transifex is free for open source projects. So, for instance, if we need languages translated, we would be able to get them translated for free. So, like, I actually do need Japanese translation, so this was at least part of the motivation.
that's so cool. Yeah. Yeah, let me know when after you do your pass, and then I'll yeah, then let's get this done.
Cool, sounds good.
Content wise, like nothing is like dramatically different, right?
Everything's basically exactly the same.
Okay.
Things are reorganized slightly, but the content itself, I did actually go through and clean up some of the documentation, not content wise, just like rendering wise, because like some of the modules, especially in the schema, for instance,
Mm.
actually had errors in the markdown. And th those errors show up when you render the Sphinx
Oh no.
as errors, well, which is good because it actually tells you your docs are broke,
Yeah.
which is one problem with the markdown. The markdown doesn't actually tell you like when you've written incorrect markdown, but when you go to run the Sphinx, it will show errors in the logs that show that that you have an error, where the error is at, and why it's rendering incorrectly.
Oh, cool. So like if you have a doc that will make an incorrect change, then the GitHub action will run and then it'll just like fail and then kind of block that PR.
Well, it doesn't fail and block the PR at this point. It just spits out the error message. I, I think it still renders
Okay,
because
okay,
I'm telling it currently to ignore errors.
okay,
But that would be a thing that we would want to add to PRs in the future is if you
okay.
update the docs that it checks and makes sure that there are no errors. That's definitely a little bit more work though, but it thankfully it is a thing that is one step more helpful in this situation because there were some of the schema docs, for instance, some of the tables were incorrectly written, so they didn't render at all. Um, and yeah, there was some docs that were also missing and things like that. So yeah, or like
Thank
links
you
that were
very much
broken and things like
for
that. Yeah,
thank you very much for working on that. It's I think it's awesome.
yeah, of course.
And then yeah, so that's awesome. That's really cool. So we talked about Sphinx PR, and then the I'm going to say like a couple sentences about this last Neo4j4 upgrade thing. So uh, doc plan in progress. So plan is in progress. There's a number of different options there's a couple of different choices that I'm considering right now, but then I will share more broadly as soon as possible. Um, yeah, that's all I have to say about that. I think but the short version is we have a plan. We're gonna, yeah, it's gonna be fine. Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Any other PRs or issues that people want to raise right now, or any other thoughts? Cool. I'm gonna go ahead and then shut off the recording then.